We're going to take the images from the previous lesson and bring them into an Android Studio project that we're going to call Visit Slovenia. That's going to be the app we're going to create. And that app has a ImageView which is showing the image. Here's our title image. And then we have 5 buttons and we can click through the different images. And I can go back to the title. So that's what we're going to create. Let's look at how to bring those images into our project. In Android Studio, I created a new project with an empty activity, and then I named it Visit Slovenia, chose where I wanted to save it. We're going to use Kotlin as our language. Then I chose the Pi AVI of 28. Here then is the project that Android Studio set up for us. The first thing I'm going to do is bring my images into my project. So I'm going to go to the res folder for resources, and I'm going to go to the drawable folder. And remember, we want to bring our images into this drawable folder. Now I can't just drag the images over. I'll have problems doing that. So instead what I'm going to do is use the resource manager. And I'm going to make sure I'm on the drawable tab up here at the top and click plus. And what I'm going to do is import drawables. That's the last option on that menu. And then I'm going to go to my images. I'm going to choose the folder that contains all the different drawable images and click OK. And we'll bring in the images from all those different folders. So here's my title. It tells me it's going to bring 5 items. And so each one of these items has 5 resolutions. And I can scroll down to the list. There's the map, there's Ljubljana, Dresnica, and the Kranja Forest. So I'm just going to click next, and I can see which folder they're going into, what the value is as far as high density, XXX density. I'm going to click next and choose import. And there now are my images in the drawable folder. I'm going to go back to my project, and I can see they're all listed here with the 5 different versions. It tells me there are 5 files in each one of these folders for the 5 different images. Now we can begin building our interface. We can go to the activity main XML file. Now it's important to remember that this is an XML file, and we can view the code, and some people like to work just in the code. I like to work more in the design viewer, the visual design editor. But you can work in split and see both side by side. So go back to design. And up here on the top, we can select the design surface. And my choice is design, blueprint, or both. So here's our design. We'll see it with all the colors. Here's the blueprint. That just gives us really the outline of stuff. At this point, I have really a reason to use the blueprint. So I'm going to choose to work just in the design mode. So I'm going to take this hello world. I'm going to slide it up here to the top, and I'm going to stretch this out. I'm going to change the text. I'm going to change the text to be Visit Slovenia. I want to make that text larger. I'm going to scroll down in the attributes to the font family. I'm going to use the Android sans serif black for my title. I'm going to change the text color. I'll use the purple 700. You use any color you like. I'm going to scroll down to the text size, and I'll make this 24 point. And the last thing I want to do is I want to align that in the center. So up here's our text alignment, and I'm just going to choose center. So we see it's constrained to the parent. If I wanted to set a certain number of pixels here, maybe I want to have 8 pixels from the top or 16 pixels from the top, I could choose that. I'm going to do 8. And we'll see now the layout to the margin of the top is 8. I'm not going to bother to give it a name or an ID. This is not going to change in the code. What I want to bring in next is a ImageView widget And I'm going to choose for the image our Slovenia 00 title. I'm just going to bring that, stretch that over. This one I do want to give a name, and I'll just name it IV for ImageView Slovenia. Now, anytime you change the name of an ID, it's going to ask you to refactor, and that's that behind the scenes code that there may be things we've already written code for. We might need to change that code. This will allow that change to be coded. We haven't done that, but I'm going to still be in the habit of clicking refactor. Now I'm going to set some layouts, some constraints here for this. My first constraint is going to be at the top to our Visit Slovenia. And if you want, you can drag this down a little bit. I'm going to click in this circle at the top and drag it to the bottom circle of the Visit Slovenia text view. And I'm going to give an 8 pixel height between the two. I'm going to take the left anchor point and drag it to the edge of our constraint layout. And here I'm going to set this to 16. And do the same thing on the right hand side. Set our end constraint to 16. Always remember to press the Enter key as you set these things. I'm not going to set one on the bottom. What I'm going to do instead is on this layout width, I've got 374 and 262 DPI. I really don't want those numbers. I'm going to choose 0, match the constraint. So it's going to take the width of those constraints that I've set up, and then the layout height I'm going to set to wrap content. Now if I were to run this, you'd probably see that it looks like our margins are much wider than those 16 pixels. So here's another thing in the constraint widget. This little triangle up here in the upper left hand corner, I'm going to click on that, and I can set a ratio of the width to the height. Now my image was 1200 by 1000. I could put that in. I could put in 12 to 10, but we can narrow that even down further to 6 to 5. All of those would work. Again, make sure you press the Enter key. Now it's pretty obvious to me that this is more than 16 pixels from the edge of my image to the edge of the constraint layout or the edge of our device. And one thing I noticed when I entered 6.5 for the ratio, it put a little W in front of that here. It says W comma 6:5. And what that W says is we're going to constrain this to a ratio of 6 to 5, but let's make the height the priority and then use constraints as necessary to get the width that dimension. So with this being an appropriate size for the image, as far as the height, the width is brought inward. I want to reverse that. I want the width to be the priority and the height to be adjustable. So all I'm going to do is just change that W to an H, press the Enter key, and then I'm going to set the height layout to 0, match constraint. Now it's telling me I'm getting an invalid float here. You can also put in a floating value. So 1.2 would be the same as 6 to 5. But this still works. I don't know if this can be deprecated or not, but for now I kind of like seeing the ratio rather than the floating value. So that looks pretty good. What I want to do is just run this in my emulator to make sure everything is looking good in reality. And that looks great. Now I notice I have the Visit Slovenia title bar up here, and I'm going to show you how to get rid of that because I want that extra real estate space in my application. One of the reasons I didn't set a constraint for the bottom anchor is we're going to add more items below this, and we'll constrain those to the bottom of our image view. So let's take a little detour into our main activity.kt file. And I wanted to get rid of that title bar. So we're going to do this in a try-catch. And I'm going to catch a null pointer exception. So I'm just going to call it NPE. And we'll add an error dialog here later. So let's put a little note here. So what I want to do, what I'm going to try, is to hide that bar. So this dot support action bar, put a question mark after that, dot hide, and that's a method. So those who took the Swift cohort with us will recognize the question mark as an optional. The support action bar might have a value of null, may not even exist. So the optional allows two different options to occur. If that doesn't exist or has a null value, then it's ignored. And if it does exist, then it's going to run our method of hiding it. But once again, let's just try this and see if that worked for us. And you'll notice that the action bar, what I refer to as the title bar, is gone. So that little script did the trick. Let's go back to our interface. I'm going to hide the emulator, and we're going to add some buttons to show the other images. In the palette, I'm going to go to the buttons area and just select the main button or standard button. Place a button here below our image. Oops. Stretch it out a little bit. And there's some align options up here on the top. I'm going to click downward, and I can put this horizontally centered in the parent or vertically in the parent. I want this centered horizontally in the parent. That'll center it. You can also find by dragging, it's going to kind of snap to the center. And I'm going to add a constraint from the top to the bottom of my image view. And we'll see that the top constraint is set to the bottom of IV Slovenia. I'm going to give that 16 units. Now let's set some properties for this button. I'm going to set the name to BTN title, and I want the text. Oh, since I changed the name, I need to refactor. I'm going to set the text to title. Then I'm going to copy and paste. So I have a second one. This one will set the name to, or the text to map, and I'll set the ID to BTN map. Again, I just like to use Hungarian notation. It's just been a part of my programming life for many years, going back to Visual Basic. I'm going to paste again. This one we'll name Ljubljana. And I'll set the ID to BTN Ljubljana. Going to paste one more time. This one's going to be BTN Dresnica. The text will be Dresnica. And then one more. And this one will be BTN Kranja. And our text will be the Kranja Forest. Capital O in there. Now when I copied and pasted from the title, it also pasted the anchor constraint for the top. I'm going to come back to the map and I'm going to undo that constraint by clicking the little X. Do that for each of these 4 buttons. And I'm going to take the constraint here at the bottom of my forest button and let's constrain it to the bottom of our constraint layout, but I'm going to set that distance to be 24 density pixels. I'm going to shift click to select all 5 buttons. I'm going to right click and we're going to create what's called a chain. We're going to create a vertical chain that will just simply distribute those evenly and provide constraints between them. We'll talk more about constraints and chains and barriers and other helpers in creating layouts, but that works really well. Now let's see how this looks in our application. We'll bring up the emulator. And that looks great. Now, of course, our buttons don't do anything. Next, we'll write the code in our main activity.kt Kotlin file to display the different images when we click the buttons. I'm going to end my emulator, hide that real estate space. I'm going to click on the title button. We're going to scroll down to the onClick attribute, and we're going to set up a function called showTitle. Press the Enter key. I'm going to do the same thing on the map. We'll set that one to show map. And then we have show Ljubljana. Show Dresnica. And by the way, the standard in Kotlin is for your functions to be named starting with a lowercase letter. And then we have show Necrania Forest. Next, I'm going to go to my main activity.kt Kotlin file. And inside our classroom activity, we're going to write a function. So the first one was show title with a lowercase s. We're going to give it a parameter of v, and that's of type Android.view uppercase v. And our code here is we're going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it my_iv for my ImageView. It is of type ImageView. And it's going to be a reference to our ImageView control that we named IV Slovenia. So I'm going to go to find view by ID. What we're going to find is r.id.iv Slovenia. And we're just going to say as ImageView. So my IV is going to point to our image view that we've created, and then we can simply say my IV dot set image resource, and our resource is going to be r.drawable dot, and here I can see my list of titles or list of images. I want the Slovenia 00 title. I'm just going to double click on that, and that is my function. Now I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to copy that and paste. And we're going to change this to show map. And all I need to do is change the document that we're referencing here to be the map image. Lost a parenthesis in there. There we go. I'm going to paste again. And we'll create our function to show the capital. And Again, we're just going to choose the second image, image number 2. Paste. Maybe show Dresnica. And then our last one is the forest. Now I'm noticing some red text here on my IV, and red text is generally a bad thing. Unresolved reference my IV. I gave it an uppercase IV, but here I had V as lowercase. So I need to fix that. And I'll do that in all 5 locations. That looks much better. Now let's test it. So I'm going to click on the map button. There's my map. Ljubljana, Dresnica, Tranja Forest. Back to the title. All 5 of our buttons work. So always want to make sure you test every feature of your application after you've created it. Make sure that each of those buttons work. It's possible I could have maybe mistyped something here in one of the buttons. I don't want to assume that every button works, even though it's the same code for the most part. That is our application using an ImageView. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Android App Development Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.